Well, ladies and gentlemen, do we have some chunky books to talk about today? I have been absent from the channel for a little bit. I've still been reading, but Marshall and I've just had a crazy month. So we've got 2 months to wrap up in today's video. We've got 2 Malazan books to go over. We've got the entirety of the Dandelion Dynasty. Look at these absolute chonkers. That's books 3 and 4, just 2 absolute thickums of books. Just outrageous. That series was an absolute trip in many good ways and some awful ways. We've got one more Wars of Light and Shadow book covered, a relatively short one as far as the series goes, and then we also had a nice little standalone in the wall for something post-apocalyptic, kind of, just a sad short read like The Road. So let's get this channel back on track. Let's talk about the fantasy books I've read in the last 2 months, what I'm going to be reading in the next month. And let me know down in the comments what you've been reading. What was the best read you've read in the last 2 months? What was the worst book you've read in the last 2 months? And what are you excited to read in October? What book can't you wait to open up? While you're down there commenting, like the video, subscribe. We're going to be talking fun fantasy things here. And if you want to see regular book reviews from me, I do have that down in my Patreon, link in the description if you want to support the channel a little extra. So even though I'm not putting up videos here, I still put my reviews up there every time I finish a book. Now, let's start with Malazan. So I did House of Chains and Midnight Tides, books 4 and 5 of Malazan Book of the Fallen in the last 2 months. And I went into House of Chains with low expectations. High expectations as in, I love Steven Eriksson's writing, I love Malazan, I love the huge world, and I was excited to be getting back to Seven Cities, where we spent most of our time in book 2. But a lot of mine and Marsha's friends that have read this one really didn't have a good time. They found themselves bored and didn't like picking up and starting off with a new character in this book. I personally disagree with those opinions. I had a great time with House of Chains. I was very busy upon reading this, so I didn't get to dive into it with as much attention and focus that I would like to give a Malazan book. With part 1 of House of Chains, this is the first time in the whole series where we get to spend an entire part of the book with one character. We're in one person's head. We're with Castle Orlong, who I believe he's going to become someone pretty important for the later books. As he goes through his journey, he's just come of age and it's his time to make a name for himself, and he's an absolute savage from a really interesting culture. And it was just more great things Malazan. Now, did this book reach the epic highs that previous Malazan books have had? No, I don't think it had any of the huge cinematic giant battles or sieges that I'd read from previous books, but there was a lot of good groundwork with certain characters, giving more background to certain characters, laying the groundwork for books to come, where we're going to spend more time in Seven Cities. I assume there was some good character duos, and it was just an interesting journey. It does get darker, but for the most part, this is great epic fantasy brilliance with incredible humor. And I will say, I've been hyping up the humor for Malazan the whole time I've been reading this series, but Stephen dials it up in Midnight Tides. This felt very Terry Pratchett, but in a very Malazan, Stephen Eriksson sort of sense, where one of the cultures we're following in Midnight Tides is very driven by their economics. They're very capitalistic people, and that's their society. The structure is just so focused on business and debts and finances. So thematically, it felt very Pratchett, but the humor was just off the charts. It felt a little bit more goofy in some aspects, where we just have 2 characters just going back and forth, and the way they talk, the way they interact, feels right out of a Discworld book. Probably Bug and Tehol are my new favorite comedic duo. Maybe there's a couple duos in Empire the Vampire I love, but the humor in Midnight Tides was insane. And again, we're jumping to a whole new area, which is something Stephen loves to do. We go back and forth between 2 continents in books 1, 2, 3, and 4. But with Midnight Tides, we jump back in time to a whole different place, and where we're getting some background for some of the characters we've seen previously, and getting a war between 2 peoples that have been rivals for a very long time. We get some pretty huge fights between these 2 peoples. By the end, we get some really interesting stuff with the magics, the ascendants, the gods of this world, And this was just such a pleasant, fun reading experience. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's just some dark moments where it gets a bit much. I'm just, oh, it happened again. But for the most part, just it just takes you to a completely different place. I'm going to have to take a little break from reading Malazan for a bit. I'm going to need some just easier, simpler reads because the amount of brain power that Malazan requires, the brain just doesn't have at the moment. Just remembering everything and being able to fully immerse myself. But yeah, great start. Great first half of the series. Now I've only got 5 Malazan books to go, so that's very exciting. Now talking about the series I've read the most of in the last 2 months, and that's the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. It's a 4-book series. I read all 4 books in the last 2 months, and this came out of the gates. Just the highest of highs. Grace of Kings was an easy 5-star book for me. I had almost nothing to complain about with this book. This book pretty much stands by itself as a completed story. You could read this as a standalone, and it's almost like a prequel for the next 3 books in the series, which is really just a masterpiece that Ken Liu's put together, though I wouldn't call it that myself, but I can see what Ken Liu had in his mind and he executed what he wanted perfectly. But coming back to Grace of Kings, we are starting in an empire that is made up of 6 separate kingdoms that don't really want to be under this emperor's rule, but things work pretty well. The empire kind of keeps the peace, keeps people happy, it's a decent structure, but everyone wants that power for themselves. They want their own kingdom back. So rebellion starts, and there is a lot of players in the game fighting back against this empire, but also vying to create their own power. And is someone just trying to free their own kingdom, or someone trying to conquer more? It ends up being 2 main rival powers fighting against each other for dominance. And that story plays out over about 10 years of time. So we just get snippets throughout this 10 years of all important moments or interesting character moments. And despite not spending tons and tons of time with each character, we get a really good connection to each of the characters Ken lays out in this book. And we just get a really awesome political story with some really good action, some really good battles of people taking down empire, fighting against other people trying to build up their own empires and conquer all these lands. Incredible tale that then sets us up for the next leg of the journey in the next 3 books, where we're trying to consolidate that power in the empire and some other threats start to come. And then we're looking into things of how to sustain an empire once you get it started. How can you keep things continued? How can you look after the people? That's another thing that Ken goes into. So Grace of Kings, really good completed story. Ken loves to get a lot of education into his books as well, and he wants the engineers to be the heroes of his stories. So that's where my pacing issues start to come in the later books. Whereas in Grace of Kings, we really spend most of the time focusing on the characters, the politics, the battles, the lands, and like laying the groundwork. In the later books, Ken starts to still talk about this political story, still all these battles, but he then starts to dive even further into his philosophy on leadership and just general life philosophy, his inventions. There's a lot of times where Ken will have a flashback mid battle scene where someone's invented something new for this battle, and we'll jump back into their whole invention process and how this machine was made. And he can do that many times per battle, where a quick battle that would normally be like 2 hours of audio listening time would take about 10 hours of listening time. So, and that happened more and more as we got further into the series, where in the first book, Grace of Kings, yes, these things were happening, but we got 10 years of story, politics, characters, all done in a 22-hour audiobook, where each book got longer and longer, going from 22 to 29 to 39 to 41 hours for the last book. It started to drag out in a way that my enjoyment was dropping. So although I can see Ken's image of him wanting to implement all this philosophy on leadership, governorship, and life, and all these inventions, he wanted to show off all that stuff in his book. It added to the series as a whole, but it took away from my enjoyment. It made for some cool moments, and for a really unique experience, and makes the series wholly its own thing. But it wasn't a thing that I enjoyed so much. But the series as a whole, elite characters, elite politics, really interesting world building where there's not really much magic. Yes, some gods show up in some small ways and do some godly things, but mostly the gods keep to themselves and have some more philosophical musings about being a god and those sorts of things, and how people should go about their lives with gods in mind. Kenley's able to get a lot of his thoughts out on a lot of different things throughout this series. Book 1 was my favourite by far. Book 2, The Wall of Storms, it's a complete story in itself, though it does play more into books 3 and 4. It was good because it wasn't as drawn out again, but then books 3 and 4, they were one book broken up into two. So book 3, a ginormous book, was all set up without too much happening except a cooking contest between two restaurants, which was a third of the book, which was designed to introduce some new characters that we needed to be there for book 4. And it got a bit ridiculous there, where it went full on, okay, this is an anime. This is Ken forcing things to happen that just so out there, just so he can get his inventions in there, get some more philosophical musings. So it felt like it was forced and felt more fable-like than like a really following a character-driven story where things feel more real in the way they're happening, where he kind of just takes you out of the story just to tell you specific things. Okay, he has to have this in his story so he can then talk about this, rather than finding a way for the characters to naturally get to those things. But a great series, and I definitely recommend The Grace of Kings. It has really fast pacing. You're jumping through time. So if you don't want time jumps through your book, don't read it. But if you want a really good political story, I think you should check out Grace of Kings. And then just feel out if you want to continue on with the next 3. If you want all those philosophical musings, if you want all the time just with the flashbacks and the inventions to really, really cool stuff. Like the battles, the world building, the politics is all insane. You just got to remember that it's going to be drawn out a little bit because of those things, but everyone can have a great time with this. It's a really special piece of art. Then I have also read some more Janny Wirtz in the last 2 months. I read The War Host of Vastmar, the 3rd book in her Wars of Light and Shadow series, and this is a part 2 to The Ships of Merior. The publishers broke that up into 2 books. This is a nice shorter read, and I thought after the insanely epic highs we got at the ending of Ships of Merior, this would have a slow start. But within the first 10 pages, the stakes of the entire series just got turned up by like 10x. The great parts of this series continued to shine in Warhost. The world building was great. The character work is insane. We've got some really, really good character moments where we're now spent 3 books of these characters and have seen them go through some really interesting, not just physical quests and journeys, but they're real mental journeys that our characters have gone through, and how their thoughts on things have changed over time. And there's some real happy moments, real sad moments of, okay, our characters realize something, but it's too late. And we've been able to see them change as people and grow or not grow and see their failings or realize their failings for themselves. Character work, the world building, the writing continues just to be beautiful and immersive. The only drawback I had for The Wars of Light and Shadow is it started to feel a little sameish. The basic plot lines for each of the 3 books are almost the same thing, just played out in 3 different spots, though the way it ended could lead to something new happening the next book in the series. So I'm excited to see if that can happen. Then the last book we have to talk about that I finished reading in the last 2 months is The Wall by Marlene Husfer. And if you read I Who Had Never Known Men or The Road, this is one of those stories that's along those lines, but it's found its way to be unique in itself. So we've got a lady who we don't know her name, and she's writing her story to us. She went up into a cabin in the woods in Switzerland, and she was isolated there by herself by some sort of wall that is just closed around, and she can't get out through this wall. No one else is there, no other people are there, and she's just there with someone's dog, a random cat, and a cow. And she's telling us what she's been doing while she's been in isolation the last few years, how she's looked after herself, how she's looked after the animals, how she's able to find food, and just her general thoughts on what her life is like now, what it used to be, how she thinks about what life used to be like. And it's just a really interesting read. You're not really trying to figure things out. This isn't a book where you get answers to why the wall showed up, why there's no people around. It's just living life with her, seeing someone just go through this. It's a really interesting thought experiment by the author, and seeing our character's relationship to the animals that she has, and how having something there for her to look after helps her to look after herself almost. Yeah, if you liked The Road, if you liked I Have Never Known Men, this is something worth picking up. You won't get the answers you want, you just get a sad journey. Very sad. Now, before we get to my October TBR, we'll go over what I'm reading now and the book club read. So at the moment, the book club book is Empire of the Vampire, which will become Empire of the Damned in October, and then we'll do Empire of the Dawn when it gets released in November. I'm very excited for this. It's been nice seeing some of you guys going through Empire of the Vampire and discovering all the things I love about this series for the first time. I've read a little bit of this one myself this month because I just couldn't resist. This has been my third read, and I've just been doing it slowly. I've been doing a chapter a night, and I think it's easy to say that this is still my favorite series. I might not finish my reread just because I have already read it twice, and I get a little guilty doing a third read of a book when I don't have any new thoughts to add to the discussion except to go read it. It's incredible. I love the characters, and it solidifies that this is my favorite. But I should probably read some new books so I can talk to you guys about some new books. But the book club's going to be there. Link down in the description. It's free. It's on Fable. We're just going through, having a great time with Gabriel de Leon, and I cannot wait for Empire of the Dawn to come out in November. It's my main. It's where my thoughts are going at the moment. I just can't wait to see what happens. Such an incredible book and series. But with me putting this one down, I have now picked up The Prophet of Adan by Philip Chase, the second book in the Way of Adan trilogy, as my evening read. So this is my physical read that I'm doing before bed. And it has been a few months since I read The Way of Adan. So reading the prologue was a lot of remembering what happened in the first book. But now I'm back in it. This is a really fast-paced book. Philip says he was inspired by The Lord of the Rings, but the pacing is just relentless. The pacing is relentless. We get a lot of story told. We get a lot of politics. We get some religious elements. We're focused on the characters. And the world buildings are really like on the smaller side, but I've had some dragons come in at the start, and this has been fun. I just am really liking getting a more classic fantasy story. We've got a chosen one. We've got someone learning their magical abilities. We've got dragons, dwarves, elves. We've got an evil mage. It's really fun, and it's really well done. I'm super excited to be getting further into the Way of Adan trilogy, and probably the books that come after that. Very exciting. The other book I'm listening to at the moment is Servant of the Empire by Janny Wirtz, and going into my October TVR, I'll also be continuing and finishing off the trilogy with Mistress of Empire. At the moment, I have a big focus on finishing off all the series I'm in the middle of, so then we can start mostly fresh when we get to next year. And I don't want to break up my series and read them across different months. I want to start just binging through series. So at the moment, my 4 ongoing series are Malazan, The Wars of Light and Shadow. Those 2 are really dense, so I will be taking my time with them, and they will be carrying out over next year. But the Empire trilogy by Janny Wirtz and Raymond D. Feist, I'll be finishing this one this month, and I'll finish The Way of Adan as quickly as I can read it, so that I can start some new things. So speaking of those new things, I'll be starting in October. Make sure you let me know what you're starting in October. Oh yes, and also Servant of the Empire, just highly political fantasy in a really honorable culture where we've got some people coming in from a different type of culture that have a different perspective, and seeing them shake things up in our world, shaking up Mara's worldviews, really interesting. I'm excited to see how Mara can continue to play the game of the court and survive the people that are trying to get revenge on her from book 1. Really interesting stuff there. It's very easy to listen to and read as well. It's very different from Janny's other works, where Janny and Raymond here have just made something that's just you can just binge through and get good politics and characters. Um, yeah. But the other two books I'm definitely going to be reading in October, along with Servant and Mistress of Empire and The Prophet of Adan, is The Academy of Outcasts by Larry Correia. This is book one of a new series of his, which has been recommended to me by my friend Andy Peliquin. He's now doing some publicity for Athenon Publishing, and he sent me over Academy of Outcasts by Larry Correia and Contact Front by Rick Putler, because I was talking to him and letting him know that I just need a break from these big chunky series. I need some short reads. So both of these are sub 350 pages. We've got one fantasy, Academy of Outcasts. We've got like a Band of Misfits, D&D adventure quest sort of thing. So I'm excited for that. Just some real fun, classic fantasy-ish vibes, some interesting world building, and that misfit ragtag group. Sounds interesting. Then Contact Front by Rick Partlow. This is more 40k Warhammer Space Marine sort of vibe. The cover looks insane and it's 250 pages, so I'm just hoping for some fun, thrilling action here with some cool characters, hopefully, and we'll see how that goes. Then, if I have the time and the brain power, I may continue Malazan or Wars of Light and Shadow. We'll see how I go, and that would either be Fugitive Prince or the Bone Hunters, and they are both some big chonkers, but they could also be a lot of fun. Like, I really want to get back to Wars of Light and Shadow. I always have a good time reading this series, and it's just cozy for my brain. But look at this Bone Hunters cover. Does that just not look like goofy Santa Claus or something like that? Just, I'm ready for more Stephen Erickson fun and humor, and getting back to Seven Cities should be a great time. So let me know what is on your TVRs, what will you be reading. Thank you so much for watching.